listening to The Breakfast Show on Faith FM with Skafy and Lindsay and the producer Tish. We are now coming to the second hour of our show. What are we going to be talking about today, Lindsay?
Ooh, we've got a miracle story from me today.
Miracle story from Lindsay.
Yeah, from my own life, actually.
Yes, I heard that you're going to be teaching people how to get their driver's license in an unusual way.
I got some loopholes to offer.
Okay, well, we're going to be listening to that story. I want to share a little bit some updates in the Kyle Sandilands and Jackie O story that has been, remember that yesterday there was like a big deadline for Kyle to present his defense, and the verdict is out. Is he keeping the contract, or is the contract not being terminated actually? You will find out soon. And also I want to talk about a new study that has come, has been led by Australian scientists, challenging the once widely believed notion that cannabis is actually good for you. Like medicinal cannabis is good for, PTSD and depression, anxiety. This new study is actually throwing that everything through the drain. We're going to be looking at the details now. So if you're into that topic, or if you've been taking medicinal cannabis for some of your conditions, well, you might want to listen to that story. Okay, now, before we move on into Lindsay's miracle story, I would like to ask producer Tish to please give us a new quiz question.
All right. What were the 3 attributes or titles Jesus gave himself for why no one comes to the Father except through him?
Ooh.
I'll read that again. What were the 3 attributes or titles Jesus gave himself for why no one comes to the Father except through him? We have 1 correct answer, and we have 2 correct answers in our studio. What were the 3 attributes or titles Jesus gave himself for why no one came to the Father except through him? If you would like to text us, please do so. We would love to hear from you on 0491 064 669.
Okay. Ready to go?
I'm ready to go. What happened? So how did you get your driver's license?
Okay, let me tell you.
Where do we start?
I need to back up. There's a bit of context for why I was trying. Okay, so this was when I was 21 years old, so a while ago now, and I was studying at university, and I didn't own a car, and I was living in a different state. So I'm originally a Queenslander. I'd moved to New South Wales. I was living in the dorms, and there was no reason for me to need a car. I was able to get around by bus and by train if I wanted to go visit people in Sydney or wherever I needed to go. But I decided in that year that I wanted to just put a pause on my studies for about 6 months or a year and go overseas and do some volunteering. I thought, you know what, while I'm young, while I'm single, I've got all the time in the world. I'm not in any rush to get out into the workforce so much, but I want to go and travel. So I think the easiest and best way for me to do that and actually be of value to someone is to volunteer. So I looked online and found some volunteering opportunities around the world, and I narrowed it down to Egypt or Hawaii, and I decided, well, my mum really doesn't want me to go to Egypt. That is a bit of a scary place. So I think Hawaii might be a little bit more my style. So I applied for this teacher aid volunteer.
Mahalo.
Yeah, teacher aid position in Hawaii. And part of the application for that was that whoever applied needed to have a full international driver's license, because I would need to be able to drive a car around the island. And so I was like, well, I've got my red Ps because I'd gotten my learners, and right before I'd moved to university, far, far away from my family, I had done a few rounds of trying to get my red Ps. It took me 2 goes before I could actually get that. And then I just didn't have the opportunity at that point to go for my green Ps. I didn't have a car. I was far away from home. And so I just never got my green Ps at that point. And so I was like, well, I need to get my green Ps, and then I need to get my opens or my blacks or whatever it is.
But wait, before you even get could you get the green Ps like straightforward because of your age, or you had to go through the yellow Ls?
Well, so you have to go yellow L's, then you have to go red P's, and then a year later after that you go green P's, and then after that you go blacks or opens, right?
Okay.
And so I just so many years had passed since I'd started my learners in Queensland. And I was living interstate. Anyway, so I was like, all right.
You had your red ones already.
I was on my reds.
Okay.
That's where I was, but I hadn't really driven at all, basically, other than doing my learners. Like after that, I hadn't driven a car. I didn't have a car. Anyway, so it was the middle of, or towards the end of the first semester, and I just decided this one particular day that today is the day I need to go and sort this out. I need to go to the main roads. And so I hopped on my little blue bike, because I'd managed to save up enough money in the previous year to buy myself a little push bike. And so I went to the nearest bus stop on my bike, which was a little way away, and managed to get on the bus. And then the bus took me to the train station. And then I was just following the little Google Maps in my phone. And I was like, I need to get all the way to Newcastle, which was probably like a 40-minute drive from where I was. I didn't ask anyone for help, and I was just taking public transport on my bike. And so I got on the train and went from there to...
Where are you going exactly?
To the Service New South Wales main roads place, whatever it's called, to get my driver's license sorted. I was like, I need to at least get my greens. I'll have to go back another time to get my opens, but at least let's just start with the greens today. Got to get this ball rolling. So I hopped on the train, and then that dropped me off at a train station, and then the map said, all right, go around the corner to this bus stop. So I waited there for a while, and then when the bus came, they were like, no, we don't let people on with bikes. And I was like, what? No, the previous place let me on with my bike. And so I managed to sweet talk the bus driver into letting me on with my bike. And so I went from there, and he dropped me off really close to the main roads place. And so I walked in, I tied up my bike.
So main roads is how you call it in Queensland, is that?
I think it's in Queensland. That's what we call it, Service New South Wales. We don't have
right.
Service Queensland. We call it main roads.
Oh, okay. Now it explains the mystery in my head.
We got Tish nodding over here. All right, no more interruptions. It's a long story. We don't have enough time.
All right.
Okay? So, I went in and I just carried my helmet in with me, and I went in and I spoke to the lady at the desk, and I was like, okay, well, I need help getting my green peas, and then I'll come back another time for the opens. And so I sat down, she's typing away and tap, tap, tap. And she turned to me and she said, well, actually, you started your learners over 5 years ago, and you've had to renew your license in a different state. And we actually don't know when you started or how long it's been, but because it was interstate and a very long time ago, we actually don't know. And so what we're going to do is we're going to just give you your green peas for free. And then she stopped and she said to herself, no, actually, we're going to give you your opens completely. We're going to skip the greens. We're going to go straight to the opens, and we're going to give it to you for free. That never happens. You cannot walk into a Service New South Wales or main roads.
Is that a loophole in the law?
They did tell me not to tell anyone. Here I am telling all of Australia.
I mean, if it's an actual law, or maybe the lady was being kind and generous.
Look, whatever it was a miracle, because I didn't have really any money.
My question is, are we safe?
Don't ask too many questions.
Okay.
I was like, wow.
Well, I can definitely get, okay, there was a miracle. Okay. I can concede.
It was a miracle. And so so she was like, here you go. Here's your open license.
Wow.
Dun, dun, dun. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. Anyway, so I walked out of there just like praising God, but now I still had to get home. And so I stopped at the McDonald's just down on the corner, grabbed something to eat to have sustenance and an extra bottle of water because I was going to get thirsty. And it was late in the afternoon. The sun was close to setting, and now the bus wasn't running anymore. And I had to ride my bike up a long, big hill and down the other side and around the corner.
Hills
and
everywhere.
It was getting really dark at this point, so I ended up getting lost a couple of times, turning into the wrong street. I nearly ran somebody over in the dark because I didn't have a torch. Like, all these crazy things happen. I eventually made it to the Cardiff train station, and I was like, phew, finally, when the train came, I got on the train, had to wait like another 30, 40 minutes before it took me back south where I needed to go, hopped off the train, and now it's like the pitch black. I had to ride my bike for another half an hour in the complete dark where there's no street lights to get back to university. I got back at like 10 o'clock at night or something.
Wow.
And I'd left at probably, I don't know, 2 p.m. or something. So I had like this whole massive long adventure, which resulted in me getting my open license for free, complete loophole, absolute miracle. And I was like, I'm going to take this as a sign that I am actually going to, like, God is blessing me and he's going to give me the application that I've applied for to go to Hawaii. I think that's going to actually happen now since all of this has come through. And that's exactly what happened. God opened the doors and I was able to go and do my service trip in Hawaii with also like a super cool story for me to share and just remember that God loves me. He likes to take me on adventures as well.
Yeah, that was an adventure for sure. I thought you were going to say at some point, look, when you miss the bus, there's no more buses anymore. And you said, look, now that I have an open driver's license, I might as well just like
steal a car.
No,
like,
I can drive legally now.
No, that's not how
That's not how you normally operate things, right?
No.
Yes, right.
Oh dear. No, but that's my story.
I love it. That's a great story.
I just love going on adventures, and God loves taking me on adventures as well. So
it is quite the adventure, and I'm very proud of you for all of these kilometers that you put in your bike.
Some days I wake up and I'm like, I need to go walkabout, okay? And I do. So
that is really cool. There you go. I do not know that. Like, we will never know if it is a loophole, if this is an actual law.
Don't try it at home.
Maybe
kids.
it was an angel. But the fact is, like, when you need, like, when God needs us to have something to accomplish His purpose, like He'll find one way or the other. He will find that. So yeah, what a great story. What about you, Tish? Do you have your open license already, or are you still in your green piece?
I should get my opens at the end of this year.
Okay.
Wow.
Awesome.
Okay.
Almost there.
Really?
Very good. Yeah, that's freedom for you all. Thank you very much. We are going to move on now. Thanks, Lindsay, for sharing that story. And tell us, you friend, do you have any interesting stories that you want to share? Maybe about an adventure, maybe about a time that God opened the door for you to do something and to find out and to satisfy a precondition to go somewhere. But let us know. We would love to learn and to know your story, your miracle story with God. So text us with us here. Maybe we can even interview you one of these days. Speaking of interviews, do you know who are we interviewing today, Lindsay?
Who are we interviewing?
Dr. John Ashton, and he's going to be talking to us about the new science that show how much water there exists under the surface of the earth. And the question is it enough to cover the whole earth with water, just like the flood story says? So if you'd like to find out about that one, you have to stay tuned. We're going to be talking to Dr. John at about 7:35 a.m. this morning.
Okay.
And my story we'll be looking at the latest developments of the Kyle and Jackie O story. There's some definitely new developments happening in that space. We are also going to be talking about the latest research about the use of medicinal cannabis in Australia and in the world. So stay tuned.
You're listening to the Breakfast Show podcast on Faith FM. Positively different.
And now, I think it's time for a quiz answer. Please, Tish, can we have one of them?
You most certainly can. I believe our question was, what were the 3 attributes or titles Jesus gave himself for why no one comes to the Father except through him? The words we were looking for were way, truth, and life, and that can be seen in John 14, verses 6.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Very
this is
good.
a beautiful passage. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So that means that every single person that would ever inherit eternal life, does not matter if you're a Hindu, if you're a Buddhist, if you're a Muslim, if you're a Jew, if you're an atheist, if you get to heaven, it's thanks to Jesus. This is the claim that Jesus is making here. So this is the claim of exclusivity, so to speak. Don't necessarily, I don't think that there's only going to be Christians in heaven. I think that God is greater than that. I think that God looks at the heart and the light that people have, but does not matter who inherits eternal life. Jesus was the savior of one and all. And the other interesting thing about that passage is that when you look at the at the Jewish temple, the sanctuary, the different compartments had a popular name. So when you're bringing your sheep or your lamb into the courts, they called that the way.
Oh, okay.
When you were inside of the holy place and the priest was sprinkling the blood in the curtain to remember that this is the price. This is the blood was paid for the sin. They called that part of the ritual the truth. And then once a year, when people went into the most holy place of the sanctuary, which is beyond the curtain, where they have the Ark of the Covenant, this is called the life. Because,
Really?
Yeah.
So he was claiming to be the whole sanctuary,
Sanctuary is
essentially.
all about me. I am the way, the truth, and the life.
Wow, I had no idea.
Did you know that?
No,
Yeah, there you go.
I learned something new.
Something
Did you
new.
learn something new today, listener? Let us know what's something that you learnt from this show today on 0491064669. Do you have a story for us to share?
Yeah, speaking of something new, there's some new developments of the
Tell us.
story that keeps on giving of Mr. Kyle and Sandlands and Jackie O. Just for, if you've been living under a rock and you don't know anything about the story, just a little quick thing. Kyle and Jackie O breakfast show is the number one in terms of ratings show, an audience show in Australia, radio show. So in Sydney alone, they have like 1.5 million people listening to it. So they made really millions and millions of dollars to their to their station ARN. And in 2024, I believe, ARN decided to give them a $200 million contract. It was one of the biggest, if not the largest ever contract for media, meaning that Jackie O and Kyle would each receive $10 million per year for 10 years so that they could have them in the show. However, things started to go not as expected because even though Jackie O and Kyle were a big success in Sydney, and their success is, in my opinion, it's a little bit, their taste is a bit questionable.
Yeah.
He is often referred to by the media as the shock jock.
Yeah.
Because they have a lot of really sexual innuendos and a bit,
right.
and kind of a, doubtful taste, commentaries and jokes and all these kinds of things. It worked for the Sydney audience, but then when they tried to scale the show nationwide, starting with Melbourne, the Melbourne people said, we're not listening to this.
No.
So they realized that, hey, their reach was not as far as they thought. Not only that, they started to have some real problems. There's actually an activist group called the Mad Effin' Witches. I'm not going to say the whole world.
Wow,
But this is what they call themselves.
Wow.
And they were basically launching a massive campaign against Kyle and Jackie O because of some of their themes being racist and misogynist and homophobic and all these kinds of things.
Okay.
Which I don't know because I don't, but this is what they're claiming. But as a result of their campaign, a lot of advertisers were pulling out of the program.
Wow.
And they're saying, look, we're not going to be advertising anymore. So
don't wanna be
ARN was
associated with
losing the money. Not only that, the Australian regulator of radio stations, they also issued a very stern warning to ARN saying, look, Kyle and Jackie O show, they have to really calm down and really tone down their sexual innuendo things, so only very mildly light for the next 5 years. If you don't do so, we're actually going to chase your license from you.
Wow.
You're not even going to be able to operate as a radio station anymore unless they behave, because they have been talking because look, who's listening to the radio? Anybody can listen to the radio.
Yeah, exactly.
So there are some safeguards around the language and so on. So you cannot be using coarse, offensive language all the time.
Yeah.
Not in the radio. In podcasts, it's fine. People can say whatever they want. There's no regulation regarding that. You're just going to have a mature kind of a stamp on your podcast online. But on public radio is a public space.
Yeah.
So they're getting basically what ARN probably is started to see is that this $20 million a year bet is probably getting a little bit too expensive, particularly if more and more people will start boycotting the show. Not only people listening, but particularly advertisers that they don't want to associate their brands with their show, because that's what the movement was going on. So what happened is that Kyle had until midnight yesterday to provide a defense for his case. And, he did provide, I believe, some kind of defense with his lawyers. But basically, ARN terminated their contract and saying, look, no, you have caused a massive, major breach into the contract. And therefore, we are no longer obliged to honor our part. And Kyle, on his hand, he's saying, no, look, wait a minute. You know exactly what I am about. I've been working for 10 years. I haven't changed anything. I have not failed my part of the contract. You will see me in court.
Yeah.
Because you have to pay me my $100 million that you have promised. So that is the answer there. And Jackie O apparently also came back down. And in the beginning she said, look, I'm not going to ever be working with you anymore. And so on. Now they're saying, look, yeah, we can do this again. It was just kind of the heat of the moment. I never said that I was going to quit.
Yeah.
So now everybody's expecting some lawyering fireworks, people lawyering up, and we're probably going to go into another Australian famous people court drama.
Wow.
In that story. Okay, all because, again, if Kyle would have only learned the lessons from the Bible,
yeah,
and saying, hey, it's there, when don't stir up conflict unnecessarily. Talk to her privately if you have any concerns. Jesus says, if your brother has sinned against you, you go and talk to that person privately.
Yeah.
This is Matthew chapter 18. Maybe for the next time, that they are listening to that, I would recommend really thinking about that, because that would have prevented this whole drama from unfolding, really. So that's the news from that. So
what else
the
do we
contract
have?
was terminated. The next one is there is a study that was published in the most prestigious medical journal, one of the most prestigious medical journals in the world. And it's the Lancet Psychiatry. And in the Lancet Psychiatry, there is this study that has found, led by Australian researchers, that found that there's no solid evidence that medicinal cannabis effectively treats common mental health conditions such as anxiety, depression, or PTSD. Now, 1 million Australians are under prescribed cannabis for medicinal use, and 60% of the cases are for these things: stress, anxiety, or post-traumatic stress disorder. And this study in the Lancet that was published in the Lancet has studied all the studies. So it's like a meta study. So they're looking at all the studies that have been published on cannabis for the last 45 years.
Okay,
from
so
1980
they just
to 2025.
Take everything and they boil it down.
And they're saying that they are shocked about how little evidence to no evidence there is in supporting that medicinal cannabis was ever good for any of that. On the contrary, can even cause more harm than good. For example,
cause schizophrenia and things?
Look, they didn't say it's causing schizophrenia, but they said if you have predispositions to have psychotic cases, yes, it can trigger that. They also found out through these studies, so there's no evidence whatsoever that it helped in cases of anxiety, that it helped in cases of depression, post-traumatic stress disorders, but other things as well, such as anorexia nervosa. However, it did find that there's some, perhaps, but very, very faint evidence that it could help with insomnia.
Okay.
And some light evidence that perhaps it can help with what's the name of that syndrome where people have these tics and they often talk about
Tourette's
syndrome.
Yeah.
Tourette syndrome, if it's a very confronting mental health disease where there's something that happens, I think, in the frontal lobe, and the person has these tics, and part of these tics is often swearing.
Yeah.
Swearing some absolutely, to the person that doesn't know, absolutely shocking language.
Yeah.
But the person it's well studied by now. It's very rare, but the person has no control over it whatsoever.
I mean, someone with Tourette's may not be swearing, but they might also just be making uncontrollable head movements or bodily movements, or they might be saying things repetitively. It might not be that extreme to be swearing their head off, but it can come across in different ways.
Yes, and there's also some limited evidence that it helps with people with autism in the autism spectrum disorder.
Okay.
That to ease up some of the effects from that condition as well. So one of the leaders of that study was Dr. Jack Wilson. He's a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Sydney, and there was an interview with him that the Australian made, and I was listening to it, and he was basically saying, look, it's amazing how much of these drugs have been prescribed on the basis of hope rather on the basis of solid evidence.
Interesting.
So which makes me think, how many other things people put in their lives that is in the basis of hope and the basis of narratives that is actually not facts and scientific evidence. One of the things that when bringing that matter to faith, however, faith is way more than wishful thinking. Faith, particularly the Christian faith, is based in actual history. It's based in, this is, I think, one of the big differences. I was once having a chat with a taxi driver, and he was from a Hindu background. I was talking to him, and I was just having a conversation, and say, hey, how do you know if all these stories that your ancestors, passed on to you about, the Hindu tradition and so on, how do you know it's true? And does it matter if it's true or not? And he says, look, in my faith, it doesn't really matter if it's true or not. And I found it fascinating because a lot of worldviews, they doesn't really matter if it's true or not. What matters to them mostly is like the lessons that you're learning or what they're describing. Jordan Peterson used to say that, some stories are truer than truth, saying that, look, because if something is describing some universal archetype kind of thing, it is, sometimes enough. And he kind of applies that to the Bible.
Yeah.
But from the Christian perspective, the Apostle Paul says, if Christ did not die and resurrect on the third day, our faith is vain.
Yeah.
The Christian faith is rooted in history. This is why the enemies of the Christian faith, if they ever tried to deny the Christian faith, you have to deny the history. Because when you look at the Bible, we have names, we have histories, we have peoples, we have times, we have kings, we have archaeological evidence of all these things. And the archaeology of the Bible has always shown to be aligned with the scriptures. That doesn't mean to say that the archaeology is perfect or is proven, but it says that, hey, if the biblical historical background is so accurate, that gives us the confidence to believe that the spiritual teachings are also accurate as well. So in matters of faith, let's not just go with whatever is the hype of the moment, but let's go with the hard fact evidence of God's word. And I love how for people that are rational people, the Bible offers just that, a very credible, intelligent opportunity for faith that is rooted and it's based in actual reality and actual history.
You're listening to the Breakfast Show podcast on Faith FM. Positively different.
And we have now the incredible honor to interview my friend, Dr. John Ashton. Dr. John, good morning to you. Thank you so much for talking to us at the Breakfast Show.
Good morning, Joseph.
Yes, I'm very grateful to listen to your voice. Now, Dr. John, I have a big question for you because when I'm talking to people about the biblical account of the flood, there is this, the Bible says that even the highest peaks have been covered with water. Some skeptics, they roll their eyes and they say, surely there's not enough water in the planet to cover even the highest of mountains. How do we respond to that? What evidence is there? Is it true? Is that an impossibility? Or is there something else that we can consider?
All right, yes. Yes, a lot of people do scoff at the concept of a global flood. And, of course, the story of Noah's survival and this sort of thing. But it's fascinating the evidence that is accumulating now. And I think, there's a couple of issues here. It talks about covering the highest mountains at the time. But we know that, for example, today, a lot of the mountains that have been pushed up after the flood. And we know this because, for example, in the Himalayas, where you've got, some of the highest mountains on Earth, there are fossils of sea creatures and shells and so forth that lived on the bottom of the sea. In Peru, for example, archaeologists well, not archaeologists,
Paleontologists.
paleontologists were surprised to find massive deposit of large number of whales and dolphins and these sort of things that were preserved, very well preserved on the mountains of Peru. And the other thing, of course, is too, if we look at, say, the mountains in Hawaii, some of those are actually, because they're rising up from the seafloor, they're very high. They're actually higher in height from, say, ground level than evidence. So we can see the surface of the Earth is contoured quite a lot. But if we look at the very deep parts of the ocean compared to the very high mountains, there's large extremes there. So we have evidence that the surface of the Earth was changed very much so. For example, if we look at Ayers Rock, Uluru in Australia there, those layers are vertical. And so here we have this massive monolith, but yet those rock layers are vertical. They've been distorted from being horizontal when they were laid down to vertical. So we have these massive contortions that occurred on the surface of the Earth.
Oh, I didn't know that. So in Uluru, we have vertical instead of, because normally you see horizontal marks like Grand Canyon and canyons in general. They are pretty common to see these in the geology. But with Uluru, it is as if that monolith was actually once it rotated 90 degrees.
Oh yeah, those beds, yeah, that's right, yeah, massive rotation.
Wow, okay.
And we see lots of examples of this, around the world, where you have layers that were down, and then some of them have been rotated at right angles or been bent at right angles. And again, powerful evidence that all these layers can't have been laid down over millions of years because they would have been so hard due to compression factors and so forth. But now, and they're bent and not cracked. So we have overall massive evidence around the world. Plus we have these massive sedimentary deposits around the world. Now, one of the main issues for the flood is and indeed for the oceans of water that we have, is where did all this water come from? And, the current for prevailing theories for a long time were that the ice came, the water came here as ice from comets and so forth, crashing into the Earth. But it's quite revealing now, discoveries that were made probably a couple of decades ago and really just highlighted recently, the massive amounts of water that are actually trapped in the mantle, or trapped well below the surface of the Earth. So
how much water is there? Like if we were going to transport all that water into the surface, for example, or just add them into the ocean, how much would that represent? Do we know?
Well, yeah, scientists obviously haven't, travelled down there and sort of actually physically had a look. But from calculations from seismic data and so forth, analysis of rocks that have come up to the surface in volcanic eruptions, this sort of thing, the material is ringwoodite, which is 9-magnesium orthosilicate. And it traps the water. It's estimated that the amount of water down there is probably equivalent to 3 times the volume of water in the oceans on the Earth.
Wow, 3 times of all the oceans?
Yeah, 3 times the amount of water than trapped in all the oceans. So this is a huge amount of water there. Now, it is chemically bound. It's not as if there's this great ocean sloshing around down there as the Earth rotates. This is water that is sort of bound in a way but can be released. Now, there's also, we know that there is still a lot of underground water that's being released when we have volcanic eruptions. I forget whether I think it's in the Atlantic Ocean. There's massive freshwater influx there occurring underground in places. But the thing that got me about some of this research is that the Bible talks about the fountains of the deep opening up and providing this water. So we know that the surface of the Earth would seem, from our geological understanding of structural geology, that the surface of the Earth was very much different before the flood, and there's this evidence of massive volumes of water coming out at that particular time, and so totally changing the topology of the Earth. So the Earth was probably had a lot less surface water. There was a lot more ground area. The other fascinating thing is, of course, we also observe, and we have overwhelming evidence for the ice ages, and they were fairly recent in terms of the so-called. In secular terms, the last ice age, only about 12,000 years ago, according to their reckoning. And they have a number of ice ages too. But we have to understand that there's actually no workable explanation for how the ice age could form other than the flood. And the flood provides and groundwaters, hot groundwaters being emitted or into the earth, mixing with the with the ocean waters, and thus making warm water here, created the evaporation, which caused the ice age. And when we do the calculations, it works brilliantly to fit that there was one massive ice age, and it was recently. And it fits in with the biblical timeline, actually, and can explain a lot of the migration that occurred after the flood and after the Tower of Babel and so forth, because this ice age would have essentially formed just after the Tower of Babel.
So let me understand. Let me ask this question. So, okay, so one evidence that we have is, look, there are fossils of even large maritime animals in like really tall mountains in the Himalayas, in Peru, in the Andes. Number one. Number two, the Earth would probably be like the mountains would probably be less dramatic and a little bit more flatter. Like the average height could well be much lower during the pre-Diluvian era. And number three, we have like these massive water deposits, like 3 times more than the current existing oceans underneath. So my question would be, how did the ice age eventuate? Because you mentioned that there's like a lot of water trapped in the surface that would evaporate and will come down, and I'm understanding as a condensation as snow. But why would the Earth be cooler than normal? Why would it snow in more places than normal? Is there anything also blocking the sunlight, for example, causing the Earth to be cooler? What's the mechanism there? Do we have any explanations?
Oh, yeah, it's just part of the evaporation cycle. And so what happens is that, I don't know whether you don't see it so much, but when I was a boy, I used to see cars driving around. They had a little canvas bag on the front, and that was full of water. And the idea was that the canvas is sort of porous a little bit, so a little bit of water evaporates, and that cools the water inside it. So what happens is that we had this warm water that came up. It evaporated. As it evaporates, it takes with it heat energy, and so this leads to a cooling effect. And the water then begins to cool vast areas, particularly near the poles. And so the ice would have spread from the poles further south initially, and then over time this melted and returned. So as the oceans then froze due to this evaporation effect, that then created the land bridges and enabled then the migration patterns that we see, so that the people could move from the area around, across to the Americas and down to Australia and these sort of things. So it beautifully explains the migration patterns of humanity, and also when we look at population levels too. If we had the flood about 4,500 years ago or thereabouts, it perfectly explains the migration levels and the population levels. For example, in the Americas, in the move through the Pacific and so forth, is all very recent. Most of the American civilizations, date back only a couple of thousand years. And so we have really powerful evidence here for the biblical scenario of the migration of the nations. And it's interesting that even when we look at the cultures in America, in South America, in Polynesia, in Africa, and of course through Europe, and even indigenous cultures here, they all have stories of the flood.
Wow.
And
that is quite amazing.
Yeah, these have been studied by, secular, scholars looking at the movements of people and historical accounts that have been passed down through their traditions. So we have evidence from, the fact that the earth obviously contained a lot more water, underground water. It can explain a lot of the movements of the geological structures that we see. Because some of it's hard to imagine, just in our mind, to comprehend how massive the amounts of water must have been that it laid down the deposits in Central Australia. They're huge. They spread over, thousands of square kilometres, this sort of thing of land here. And we've got the...
You mean the water deposits or mineral deposits? No,
the water spreading areas of strata, spreading areas of sand over huge areas. The same in America. You've got the Morrison Formation that has a lot of the dinosaur fossils and this sort of thing. It spreads from, New Mexico to Canada. What water movement is going to spread a layer, 50 metres or maybe 100 metres thick of sediment over an area that size, the size of the United States pretty well, these deposits are huge, like the limestone deposits that have been set down, chalk deposits spread from Ireland to Turkey. And we know they were formed at the same time as the massive deposits that are all under Australia there and exposed in the Great Australian Bight and so forth. So the evidence for the flood, for a global flood, for this global catastrophic deposition of massive amounts of minerals, conglomerates and rocks, and and the water flow in some places must have been huge.
Absolutely.
You have boulders a couple of metres in diameter being rolled along.
Yes, well, imagine the sheer strength of water necessary to roll these massive monoliths along. Dr. John, we do have to move on, but I just want to thank you so much for bringing such a fascinating topic, and it's incredible how much evidence there is to support the biblical account of the flood. Thank you so much for bringing that up to us. And we're looking forward to talk to you again next time on the show.
Thanks for being a part of the Faith FM family. Join our community on Facebook or get in touch at 1-800-FAITH-FM.